It's time.
Most fantasy players will react to free agency the wrong way. Okay. Player signed somewhere, Twitter's going to explode. The ADP movement, it might jump 2-3 rounds or however it might be. And then after draft day, come 6 weeks later, nothing's actually changed. Free agency headlines just move the market. Understanding how teams actually build rosters is what wins your fantasy league. Welcome to the Front Office Podcast. I am your host, Pistols. Tonight is episode 6, and we are going to break down the AFC East. Team needs, realistic free agents, realistic free agent signings, and how those moves should affect your draft. We're not predicting the headlines. We know the headlines because they come out. And that's what we read, and that's what we react to. But we're going to learn how to react to them when they actually happen. So let's get into it. Tonight, as I said, we are going to go over the AFC East. The division itself, the past couple years, have been primarily dominated by the Buffalo Bills. They've won division titles, I think, 5 or 6 times out of the last 6 years or so. What's up? What's up, Professor? But we saw some movement this past year. The Patriots. We saw the Patriots win the division this year, and the Bills finished second. The Jets are still a mess. The Dolphins are a mess. As a Bills fan, we love to see teams be a mess. It makes the division easier. The structure is really kind of changing, and we saw 2 teams get new head coaches. Okay, Mike Vrabel last year had a full season, took them to the Super Bowl, ultimately lost. We saw the Dolphins fire Mike McDaniel. Now they have a new head coach. I honestly can't even remember the guy from Green Bay. I think they're like special teams guy or quarterbacks coach or whatever he is. Not really worried about the Dolphins. Never worried about the Jets. They still got Aaron Glenn. Whatever. But the ultimate goal is to make it to the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl. Okay. That's what really matters, but free agency decisions, we are in free agent time. We are in the free agency period, and it starts next week, Wednesday, I think the 9th or 10th or whatever day that ends up being, the 12th. Dates are hard. If you're a contender, you just patch the holes, unless you're the Bills and you make the wrong decisions every year after year, whatever. But understanding that context will help you evaluate realistic player movement. So we are going to start with the Jets because they are the worst team in the division, and I want to get them out of the way because this is an easy topic. Jets don't really have any free agents. Nobody is really worth talking about. Tyrod Taylor, maybe. Breece Hall just got franchise tagged. So they're either going to look for a trade or release him or however that's going to work. But, I mean, they have spent so many seasons trying to find an identity, figure out some stability with their team. Their quarterback stability has been atrocious. They have no stability there. They tried to bring in Justin Fields last year, and it just ultimately failed. He ended up getting hurt a couple games. They went to Tyrod Taylor a couple games because Justin Fields wasn't playing very well. But I mean, it's one of those things. Like, the Jets are the Jets, and I love the Jets being the laughingstock of the AFC East because it's hilarious to me. I hate the Jets. I also hate the rest of the division besides the Bills, but I'm biased. But we're not here for that. So anyway. What they really need to do, free agent acquisitions for the Jets are really not going to help the Jets. When evaluating that team, they are in full rebuild mode. Again, probably for the 10th time in 10 seasons. They just can't seem to figure it out. But I mean, realistically, they have to get a quarterback. This year's draft class is not very strong. It's not the strongest. QB draft class, so I don't expect them to take a quarterback with the second overall pick. I expect them to find one to help bridge a gap that they are in serious need of this year. I know Justin Fields is. I don't think he's a free agent this year, so they're stuck with him. But if they can bring in somebody, realistically, I can see like Kirk Cousins going there to maybe try and stabilize that position for a little bit, and you got Garrett Wilson there still. He's been pretty solid fantasy wise despite being on a bad team, because bad teams produce fantasy points whether you like it or not. Could see Kyler Murray go there. That's a good point. Could see Kyler Murray go there if they just came out today that they're going to release him next week. Come free agency officially opening. So Kyler Murray is just one of those guys. He's just, to me, he can build that bridge, I guess. He's short and speedy, I guess, is really his biggest attributes. He doesn't really have that big of an arm. But I think they would probably want to go the veteran route, especially if they do draft a quarterback at 2, which I can't see them actually doing that. Which, because we know the Raiders are going to take Mendoza, that leaves like Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, probably not year one starters in my opinion. Maybe they go the kid from LSU. I don't know how to say his name. Either way. So, and being in a full rebuild mode, it really makes fantasy irrelevant for them. I guess if they keep Breece Hall, he's an option, but he's a late round pick. But they're not really looking. I don't think they bolster their team and in free agency. I don't think that's really smart of them to do. But they're just a bad franchise. Like I said, the Jets are. It's going to be. This is an easy segment talking about the Jets because they're just in rebuild mode. They don't have. I mean, they have a ton of money. They have like $70 million, maybe more, I think, in cap space that will help them in free agency to sign players. But it's just really hard to want to have to find guys that actually want to be a Jet, and they've been the laughing stock of the NFL for a little while. So it's like really kind of bring somebody in. It is what it is. But it's really just about that stability and finding a guy that can come in and actually be a decent quarterback. Definitely, I don't know, maybe Malik Willis goes there, but I highly doubt that because I think he would be a better fit in Miami, which is who we're going to talk about next. But I mean, if the offensive stability improves with the Jets in this offseason and free agency coming up, then I might be more inclined to draft a Jet player. But Garrett Wilson's really the only one on my radar, or Breece Hall. Until I see some more stability, the Jets are just irrelevant for fantasy football. So moving on from them, let's get into the Dolphins. The Dolphins are a funny team. They had Mike McDaniel. He was. I'm convinced he was a Colombian drug lord, or maybe the Miami Air just changed his look. I don't know. But Miami, they had a very, very speedy offense. They had Jalen Waddle and they had Tyreek Hill, who they released, who is now a free agent. So really, you're just looking at, Jalen Waddle is their sole, their sole wide receiver there. But with Tyreek Hill leaving and being injured, and he's probably not going to be the same guy anyway, but they had one of the speedier offenses in the league. But I mean, their primary need is wide receiver now that they cut Tyreek Hill, and you can't just have Jalen Waddle there. I don't even know who any of their wide receivers are. I think they had Westbrook Akine from Tennessee when they signed him in the offseason, didn't really do anything. Tua just hasn't been the greatest quarterback for them. He's shown flashes, but his injury history is insane. With the concussions that he's had, I think he's probably one or two concussions away from just being out of the league. Um, you know, with this, I know nothing about this new head coach, so I couldn't even tell you, what kind of philosophy that they're gonna run, or what kind of scheme that they're gonna run, or where they want to be. Outside of Devin Achan, who's been their lead offensive producer for the last 2 years, he's really the only guy that I would think would be worth drafting from Miami, especially if they keep on that run heavy offense. Who, yeah, I mean, he's also a guy that has a ton of catches out of the backfield, so his fantasy numbers are through the roof. He's definitely a first round pick, probably running back one, could be top three in the league this year after Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, who is now the sole guy in Detroit after they traded David Montgomery. But we'll get to them, of course, when we get into the other episodes with the division breakdowns. Um, it's just really hard for me to talk about bad teams because I don't think necessarily that this is a rebuild year for them. I know they do have a head coach, and usually a new head coach means rebuild, bringing in his guys and wanting to, but wanting to start over. But they have a foundation. Now, I had mentioned Malik Willis, and I think this could be very interesting for the Dolphins. He has definitely shown that he could be a starter in the league. Now, that would require Tua to not be there. So whether they trade Tua, which I could see, and here's another scenario that I saw for the Dolphins too. If they traded Tua to Arizona for Kyler Murray, two similar guys. I think Tua is probably better than Kyler Murray, despite his history. But I mean, Miami has built an offense based on the skill position at the wide receiver position. They've always had, like I said, those speedy guys. So bringing new guys in, what does that mean for Jalen Waddle? Some of the top wide receivers that are, you know, out there, like Mike Evans is out there, Rashid Shaheed is out there, but I don't know if he really makes the team better. He fits their bill as a speedy guy, he can get down the field. So I could see Shaheed going there, but I mean that's been their offensive scheme is those fast, speedy guys. So the Dolphins are a weird one because when Tyreek was there, he had a 2,000-yard season, so it's not like they didn't use Tua and throw the ball around and hit those guys down the field and create fantasy points for fantasy managers. But the excitement from Miami really just comes from those big plays. They had a lot of plays downfield, and like I said, when Tyreek was there, he was just running all over the place. But they played to Tua's strengths as well, and I don't think Tua has that big of an arm, but he had the accuracy to go with it. So if Tyreek was coming across the field on a 5-yard slant route, he had the speed to break away and turn it into a big game, and that's where the excitement came from with them, was watching those big plays happen. And Devin Achan again is a big play guy that can create massive gains from nothing. And being a Bills fan, we see Miami 2 times a year, and we see what Devin Achan has done to us. I'm pretty sure he rushed I'm pretty sure he owns our defensive line, which is crazy. But trying to bring in guys that will fit that bill, that fit the philosophy of the Dolphins. Like Rashid Shaheed is really the only guy that comes to mind. Now Miami is struggling for some cap space. I know they have a ton of money in Kyler Murray, and I know, or not Kyler Murray, I'm sorry, Tua Tagovailoa, and I know Tyreek Hill ate up a lot of that too. So that dead cap is pretty crazy. But trying to find those guys that fit that philosophy is going to be tough, and especially in this free agent market that's out there. Guys like Romeo Dobbs and Alec Pierce, they're not speedy guys. They're more possession receivers. Alec Pierce is the product of broken coverages, and he had a pretty decent season with the Colts, but they transition tagged Daniel Jones, and I don't think they're gonna tag Alec Pierce unless they can figure something out in the next few days. But you know, skill players who can operate in space are really those guys that they look for. And really, the best one to do that was Tyreek Hill, and they just let him go. So, of the free agents, I have to pull up the free agent, the top free agent list. Let's do that now. But if you don't see big plays, you're not going to get the excitement out of the Dolphins from me. And that's just my opinion, I guess. Feel free to fight me on it, I guess. Yeah, we're not going to waste any time here. Moving right along, though, since I'm done talking about the Dolphins and the Jets, I don't care anymore. Next, we're going to go into the Patriots next, because the Patriots, let me tell you, they brought in a lot of guys last year that were basically, I don't want to say the rejects of the league, but they brought in guys who were very cheap, who they signed long term, minus Stephon Diggs, who they brought in for 4 years, who's in his 30s now. But they don't have very many free agents coming up on their roster. So with the Patriots, I mean, they're not going to be really looking to free agency to create that, to fill those voids, basically. The only ones that are really free agents that they have, Austin Hooper, but they got Hunter Henry, so they're not really losing anybody there. They just continue to shape their offense with the guys that they have. They built around their young quarterback, Drake May. It killed me to see them win the division. Now I credit Mike Vrabel a lot of that. Being a very, very good head coach. He really is. He's one of those guys. And now, like I said, with them not having many free agents, they're bringing back the continuity, I think is the word there. Consistency, having the same guys year in and year out. That will create comfortability with the quarterback, with the scheme, and the offense that they want to run. Now they do have two really good running backs in Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson, who is their rookie last year, and now he's going into year two, and he took a lot of the carries late in the season. Ramondre Stevenson was their playoff workhorse. But the Patriots, historically they target versatile players that can play all over the field. And that's kind of what we saw in their offense with what they had this year. Kayshon Boutte and Pop Douglas. Stephon Diggs is a great possession receiver, always has been. He, had the unfortunate injury when he was in Houston with the ACL tear, but he came back on the Patriots and put up a very, very good season. A ton of red zone targets. Those red zone targets turned into fantasy points. Stephon Diggs was very solid. Outside of the running backs who put up points, but they've always had that flexibility. The versatility can create the opportunities. Those guys that they bring in. It's just focusing on that role clarity for them, which I think they have a pretty good clear-cut role on who their guys are and where their depth chart is, and who they have on their roster currently. Let me pull up the Patriots roster because I'm blanking on everybody on their team. Oh, Kyle Williams, Matt Collins, Demario Douglas, Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte. Those are the very solid receiving core. I think Matt Collins is, I don't know, he's only got 1 year left anyway, but I mean that they created that core, so I don't think they'll be looking to free agency to kind of bolster up anything on offense, especially in a fantasy standpoint. You're not going to bring in a guy that's just going to be over the moon. Um, Someone that's going to be a number one guy. They kind of have their core right now, and I think they're going to ride it out, at least until Stephon Diggs is not there anymore. Develop their young guys, which they do a very good job at. Mike Vrabel is very good at doing that. So I don't really see them bringing anybody in. They have very very young team. So as young as they are, they're pretty set in their ways. So that makes it tough. Um, but you know, just keep an eye on how those roles progress on that team. I have a rule because I'm biased. I don't draft anybody from the Patriots, but if you must, uh, always keep an eye on the running back situation there. They do like to run the committee, so you will be seeing a split difference. But I do know Mike Vrabel, time to time, will just roll the hot hand. So if Ramondre, it could be a nightmare if you draft one of those two running backs that you're going to be guessing every week. Um, and same with the wide receivers. They just, they have a pretty decent target share between their starters. So points could be there 1 week and gone the next. Um, but enough about that. We're going to get into the team that everybody wants to hear about, the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills, oh boy. What do I say about the Buffalo Bills? Um, they are, they have come a long way. We saw the Bills um, win the division time and time again. Like I said, they did lose it to the Patriots last year, but we saw Sean McDermott get fired this offseason, and Joe Brady is now taking over as head coach. He was their offensive coordinator last year. They brought in a couple new guys to fill those voids. I believe it's, oh my god, I can't even think. Carmichael, I believe, was from Arizona somewhere in there, and then Jim Leonard, who was the assistant coach in Denver, to hopefully fix the defense. But the Bills, they have lacked a true number one receiver for the last 4 years. We saw Brandon Bean not really be too aggressive in free agency. We always see him bring guys back who have been there previously. I don't know if it's because they know the system and they know the offense, but um, the Bills are a very quarterback driven team. They rely on Josh Allen a lot, and I think Josh Allen knows that he always has to be Superman. Um, he It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's good when it works. It's bad because you see the turnovers happen. You see him, as he gets flustered throughout a game. He really tries to take over a game and tries to put the team on his back. Adding a big wide receiver, a guy that can go up and get the ball, it would be huge for the Bills. Their biggest, that's the biggest offensive question that the Bills have this offseason is who is going to play wide receiver for them. We have a lot of guys that, the ball gets distributed to. We saw Brandon Cooks come in late in the season when he got waived. Turned out to be a pretty decent signing, but he is now a free agent. So we have to figure out that. Um, you know, I've said it before. I am tired of the everybody eats mentality. I want to see one guy get 170 targets, and everybody else kind of trickle in after that. I don't need 10 guys on the team to all have 60 catches. That's absolutely ridiculous to me. But it's just outside of Josh Allen and James Cook, Josh doesn't really have anybody to throw to. Like I said, we have a couple guys that can be great. Khalil Shakir is a great slot guy. He can't play the outside. We have a great tight end in Dalton Kincaid, who came in a couple years ago, has been very, very solid for them. We kind of moved Dawson Knox into that blocking tight end role, and who can make a great catch every now and again for a first down. But they need to target that big wide receiver to really, really help Josh Allen out, which is why I really like Mike Evans here. If they somehow sign Mike Evans, he obviously instantly becomes the best receiver on your team. He becomes that guy that can get 150 targets to 170 targets as long as he can stay healthy. Guys coming off 11 straight, 1,000-yard seasons. He missed it last year because of the injuries. But he's typically a guy that has been pretty durable. I would love to see them bring him in and really kind of make him the focal point of the offense, especially for Josh, so he doesn't have to feel like he needs to do everything. I think that can get us back to, is he going to run or is he going to throw? Josh Allen has a cannon of an arm. We've seen it week in and week out. But over the past few years, we haven't had anybody downfield that he can really throw the ball to. So we kind of stick to an offense that relies heavily on, short hook routes over the middle of the field or out routes to the outside. So, realistically, I could see a guy like Mike Evans coming to Buffalo. He's a winner. He's won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady when Tom went down there after he left New England. So he knows what it's like to win and keep that competitive drive going. The Bills just need to bring in that guy that that can really distribute, that we can distribute the ball, and he's a threat on the field every time the offense takes the field. To me, I would really like to see maybe a guy like Romeo Doubs as well come in and play his part on this offense. It's just one of those things that, he's been really solid in Green Bay. He's a young guy that we can kind of build around, which would be wonderful. Just really look to get him the ball. Yeah. For me, just the Bills have always been a very solid team. Okay. Especially the past few years, especially when Josh Allen got here. But never having that guy ever since Stephon Diggs, he was that guy that, he was that possession receiver, the guy that we fed targets to. We kind of lost him, and now we've been stuck with just a bunch of scrubs who, there's everybody eats mentality, and I'll say it a lot, but it's got to stop. So bring in Mike Evans. I would love to see like some sort of insane trade, either for AJ Brown or Justin Jefferson. One of those two guys just instantly make your wide receivers better. Justin Jefferson has been a guy who we saw be very, very good when Kirk Cousins was there. I struggled a lot with JJ McCarthy. Not sure what they're going to do there, but being as stable as the Bills are at the quarterback position makes a huge difference to where you draft your wide receivers for the Bills in fantasy. A guy like Mike Evans, to me, automatically jumps to the top of the list for the Bills as far as drafting wide receivers from that team. Typically, we saw in drafts people stay away from the wide receivers, but for the most part, it's just like, the Bills haven't had that one guy that comes in. Now I know Mike Evans it's like 32, so that kind of scares me a little bit, but he's still a guy that comes in, works hard, is going to be, a main target for Josh Allen. And of course you have James Cook in the backfield too. So I really want to see the Bills kind of get back to the identity that they had when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator, where he kind of unlocked the talent of Josh Allen. And, you know, when you evaluate the roster come draft season and for the Bills, it's really going to have to. It really comes down to that role and what role those guys are going to play. Um, where's the volume going to be? Are we still going to be in this? And it's tough to say because we haven't seen Joe Brady be a head coach before. So we don't really know. This is all speculation, of course. We'll come back to we'll have an accountability show to see if I was right about the Bills and the rest of the division. I do think the Bills can win the division again as long as they get that guy that they just feed the ball to. I just want to see them, get back to their winning ways. I want to see them put up 40 points a game again and lead the league in offense. Like I said, that volume is the key. Are those guys going to get the volume? So if you're not drafting Josh Allen and you're not drafting James Cook, who else are you drafting? Bringing in that high target wide receiver is going to be all the difference for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills to me are they're just it's just all about the entire division is the Jets are the Jets. So they're going to be at the bottom of the division. The Dolphins might do something if they can figure it out as well. So it's really just going to be a battle between the Bills and the Patriots. Historically, the division has always been competitive, but we've kind of gone away from that competitiveness with how bad the Jets and the Dolphins have been, and the Patriots up until last year since they won the division. But it's just one of those things I want to see. It's just let us get back to where we're supposed to be. You know, the Bills have the most high-powered offense, so that is going to be the deciding factor on who to draft and when to draft them and where players are going to fall in the draft as far as the AFC East goes. The Patriots are becoming more stable. As I mentioned, they have a very young team that they're bringing back pretty much all of their guys. The same team basically that they had last year is going to be on the field again this year. So that stability is being created, and with the stability comes the consistency, and the consistency creates the fantasy points. When you can define those roles on a team, that's where the volume comes in, and that's where the points are going to be. Some teams concentrate too hard on the opportunity, and others distribute it. So, understanding these tendencies will help you avoid overreacting free agency. Like I said, I love free agency, and it's all headlines until we actually see and break down, where they're going to fit into the depth chart. So all I can say for the AFC East, I will predict that it's going to be the Bills, the Patriots, the Dolphins, and the Jets in that order. For the division, we'll see the Bills and the Patriots in the playoffs again. Unfortunately, we'll see the Patriots in the playoffs again. Hopefully, we can do something and knock them out if we have to. So what it means for your draft is free agency shifts the perception, right? And that's the whole premise of the show and the whole idea behind it. Perception and production are not the same thing. Just keep that in mind. The production comes on the field, obviously. The perception is the headline. How we see it, that's what we react to. Draft board should only move when the real opportunity changes. Keep that in mind when you're going into your draft day and you're analyzing. You're sitting there at whatever pick you are and you're trying to figure out who to draft next. Projected volume changes, projected snap shares change, projected red zone usages change. It all changes with free agency. Now, this, of course, it's all prediction and speculation on where guys can go and what if teams even make any moves in free agency. Sometimes we see teams like the Green Bay Packers who don't really go through free agency and add anybody. We've seen that over the years. It's just historically how they've been. Other times you see one team make all the moves. It just all depends on where they want to go in their scheme and their philosophy and how they want to run their offense. So that was the AFC East. A little mini breakdown there before free agency actually begins next week. Next episode, next Sunday, we're gonna go over the NFC East. We're gonna break down that division over there and see who's draft worthy, potential free agents. We're just going to continue division by division until we're done. That should lead us right up until the draft. We prepare now and win later. Episode 5 of the Front Office Podcast. I'm your host, Pistols. Appreciate y'all for being here. We'll catch you on the next one.